When you come to Germany as a doctor, you will have to pass a couple of exams, and one of them is the FSP, the Fachsprache or Fachsprachenprüfung. And everybody knows that this is a case-based exam. So the exam is working in a way that you have a simulated history that you have to take. Then you have to transfer this information to a doctor, and then you will have a medical conversation with your examiners. So it is basically case-based most of the time. So there is this assumption that as long as you know the cases or you study the cases which are frequent in the city where you're going to take the exam, that you'll be fine, that this is not such a difficult exam. And as long as you study those cases, then you'll be fine. And I will debunk this myth for you, which is going to have a huge impact on your preparation for the FSP. And I'll explain to you also how this myth came into being. My name is Matthias Behrens. I'm founder of Fachsprache.org, the largest online community and academy for international doctors who want to come to Germany and, of course, pass the FSP and KP exams, among other things. I'm recording this in English, mainly because I know that in the very beginning of your process, when maybe the FSP is still a bit far down the road, you might not have the German language skills in order to follow a complex argument. So I'm doing that for everybody who is not yet speaking as well German in order to follow an argumentation in that of that complexity. So let's get right to it. Yes, it is true that the exams are case-based. And I also understand that this assumption that preparing only for these cases kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it's like in medical school where if you knew what subject would be asked, then you would have such an easy time. You would have such a big advantage because it just narrows down what you have to study. The issue here is that the exam is very different from what you have been going through in medical school. It is not about you knowing what might be the right answers. It is about you being able to communicate. And a native speaker will notice, even if you know the case, if you can communicate or not. And this is the largest and biggest trap. People who go to the exam thinking that just knowing what are the frequent cases, they fail often. Now, let's look at it from a few different angles. If you are already proficient, if you have great language skills, then knowing the case or not knowing the case does not matter. You will perform well in the FSP. Listen to that again. If you're already proficient, if you already have the skills, it doesn't matter if you know it, if you don't know it. And those are the people who then go through the exam and say, oh, you know, I just studied from a few protocols. It was easy peasy, no big deal. I just studied for a week or two. Yeah, these people were already good in the first place, but this is not everybody. I mean, of course, there are a lot of people who are not on such a high level when it comes to language and communication in medical German. This is just a fact. And these people are ill-advised to go down that road and use that strategy. And that also is a reason why the fail rates are so high for the FSP. Sometimes it's so surprising to be like, why is still anybody failing the FSP? How can that happen? And what reason is this outrageous myth? And here you really have to look at where are you actually standing? Like, how good are you really? Just because somebody passed in a certain way does not mean that you pass in a certain way. And remember, the exam looks at very, very different skills than it would be in medical school. That was about knowledge. But in the FSP, it is maybe 20% about knowledge, if at all. It's about terminology. It's about proper pronunciation. It's about being able to communicate. It's about the separation of the terminology, or how you would talk to a medical professional like your colleagues, or how do you talk to a patient. So the separation of these two worlds of language, this is important. This is what matters. And you just do not get that just from studying a few cases, or at least it's very risky. So again, when I'm being asked the question, what cases are frequent in this or this or this city? With all the experience and authority I have in the field, my reflex is usually to say, it doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't. The thought that you have an advantage is marginal. And now it becomes complex. I mean, I'm saying, okay, it doesn't matter, and it really doesn't. But of course, when you practice and when you train, I mean, what do you train with? Of course, you train with the cases which are frequent in your city. That's fine. I'm not advising against that. Of course, that does make sense. But you still have to train in a way that you actually acquire the skills. And this is where people fail. People think just because they read the cases and they know what the cases are about, that they will be able to perform them adequately. And do not underestimate your examiners. Just because they're doing the same case in some cities, for example, in Munich, it's well known that the cases are very stereotypical. They're very repetitive. Almost nothing changes. Yeah, I get it. I know it. But that does not mean that you wouldn't notice if somebody can or cannot perform well. I do the same. I mean, I have standard cases, and well, often I improvise and I invent the cases on the go while I'm doing them when I practice with people, right? But I use the same cases since years. Like the foundation of the cases has really not changed. And I'm really, really throwing people off balance with the same boring cases time and time again. It really, really, really does not matter much if you know the case or if you don't. For an examiner, it is still easy to see if you react to the parts of the exam which are non-standardized. Yes, there is the case, and yes, it's mostly about it, but the precise questions that you're being asked, they're not choreographed, they're not planned, they happen spontaneously. So there's always this random part of the exam. And this is why people come back from the exam and say, oh, you know, I studied it exactly like it was in the protocols. Oh, but you know, I still didn't pass, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, I'm still sorry for you if you made that experience. I'm not laughing about you, but it's just plain silly and wrong to assume that just with studying some protocols you can pass. And again, this myth is being created by people who already were very skilled. And I've come across these students so much, you know, they're coming to having an assessment with me, and I tell them, you're good to go. You don't even need any training anymore. Just do it. And then they write their experiences somewhere on Facebook or WhatsApp or wherever. And they say, yeah, it was so easy, and I just did ABC and nothing else. And then I'm always like, oh my God, don't say that. You know, people take your advice, and it creates a disaster for some. And that's a problem. It's really as simple as that. So the proof you have from that, like if it would be that simple, then Munich, you would have, I don't know, 90% passing rate. But this is not it. Still, I don't know, 40-50% of people fail or more. Like, so there seems to be a problem with the strategy, right? I mean, not people who study with me, but the general average fail rate is like that. And this is incredible. After so many years, I think they haven't changed their cases in, I don't know, 1 or 2 years being the same. I mean, there's a slow turnover of cases, but in general, they've kind of remained the same. You can still study with protocols from, a year back, and you will get that case maybe in your exam, but that has little impact on the likelihood if you will pass or not. So if you're already good, you will pass no matter what. And if you have issues, you will fail maybe if you don't have a proper preparation. So this would also apply, and here it's a little thought experiment, if you would know the case. If I would say to you, take an FSP, and I give you the protocol before, you can read all the details, I would still be able to find out if you would fail or pass, or if you have the skill level. It is still recognizable for anybody who has a bit of experience and who's a native speaker and who has medical education. So there it is. Now, what is your solution? First of all, you have to know in which of these categories are you. Are you one of these people who will just walk through the exam because it's already easy for you? Or are you more in the center? Are you already quite solid, but you need some specific twist, some specific intervention in order to not be surprised during the FSP by the specific demands that this exam might have? Or are you in the third group, and do you really have relevant deficits in language and terminology, and do you really have to sit down and do some homework? Well, the first group finds this out in an assessment with me. Here I simulate the written and the oral part of the exam, and I give you a feedback. And since you're paying me for this, I have no incentive in selling you any trainings. And very often I gladly inform the participant that they can just take the exam, maybe read up on one or two things, but, you know, they would pass with a high likelihood. Now, the middle category are those who need just very specific interventions. Here, one-on-one training, like 1 or 2 sessions, are usually enough. I do not do large numbers of interventions because my standard is very high, the intensity is high, and since we record the talking and we write everything down that you need to know, you get the maximum out of the session. So you need less one-on-one training with me than you would have ever thought, and that can make all the difference and is probably the right intervention for you. Now, when you're more at the lower spectrum, the best advice is for you to start with the complete video course that I do have on fachsprache.org for the FSP. It contains all the classes, over 200 hours of videos that you can listen to, sorted by case and topic, and you can listen to what interests you most. And also every part of the exam is being represented there, and you choose what matches best to you. And the thing is also cheap, which is probably the best about it. You can listen to it whenever you have time. You're flexible with it. And then when you have an appointment for the exam and you know when the date is and you still feel insecure, then you can still do an assessment, and you can maybe schedule 1 or 2 or 3 intensive coachings if you even need them. This is what the assessment is for. So there's a strategy for everybody. It is the most nerve-saving, time-saving and money-saving strategy that I am aware of to get through the FSP, and it's a safe bet. Take advantage of my extensive experience in that field, and I hope that this advice prevents you from an unnecessary failing of this exam, because this is really not an exam that you should ever fail. The loss of money, time, and nerves is totally preventable, and with some proper advice and navigation like I just gave you, you should be able to get through it. Wish you lots of success and also a little bit of fun getting through it. It's really not that bad with the right interventions. And please, ladies and gentlemen, let's stop the nonsense and let's stop repeating these myths and harming other people by repeating them on their path, and then they learn it the hard way anyways, and we can prevent that.